All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my 2022 MAC predictions. There's going to be timestamps below if you'd like to jump around, as I'll be lightly touching on each team, then to cap things off my conference title prediction along with some awards. Kicking things off, Miami, Ohio. I have them claiming the East Division, 28.9 points per game a season ago. Brett Gabbert is back, 2,648 yards, the brother of a former first-round pick. 26 touchdowns, only 6 picks a season ago, 265 yards per game through the air for him. Miles Marshall, he arrives from Indiana. That's going to be a big, undersized playmaker for them that they can utilize in a variety of different ways. Mac Hippenhammer, second on the team with 786 yards and 46 receptions. They also got Jack Calderon and Jalen Walker behind him, who were quite productive. So they have a nice little receiving game here. Nothing but young backs last season for this running back group. 147 yards per game on the ground. Keon Mozzie, team leader, 556. He's back. Kenny Tracy at 305 and 3 touchdowns. Great offensive line from a season ago. Probably the best in the group of 5. They get 4 starters back up front. That's big for that offense. I think they're going to have some nice balance, and they're going to have that nice leadership up front. 6 starters are back for a defense that led the MAC in fewest points per game allowed at 22 per contest. 368.5 yards per game allowed, was also third in the conference. 102 tackles for loss as a team last year. They do lose all 6 players that had 8.5 or more. Big-time losses in the front 7. Numerous guys transfer out, like Cam Butler, Ivan Pace. The secondary's promising, though. Matthew Salopek, 112 tackles, 7 tackles for loss. He had 6 pass breakups. He did a little bit of everything from his safety spot. John Saunders had 3 picks and 4 pass breakups as a freshman last year in limited action. Jaquez Warren, he had 42 tackles himself as a freshman. Michael Dowell, he comes over from Michigan State. Nearly 2,900 yards allowed in the back end. Progress is imminent, though, for this secondary. The front 7 is a little concerning. That's why I was a little hesitant to pick them here. They're around the table in this division, but it's a pretty soft division. Look at number 2 here, Bowling Green. 17 returning starters, 9 on offense, 317 yards per contest, and 21.4 points per game. Pretty poor numbers from this offense. Matt McDonald, though, 2,500-plus yards, 12 touchdowns, 7 picks. Obviously not a great ratio, but the yards, that's impressive for this offense, especially since he entered last year. A pretty hefty task of lifting this pass offense a little bit. He returns the top 3 pass catchers from a season ago, Austin Osborne, Tyron Broden, 500-plus yards from 2021, and Christian Sims at tight end, 41 receptions, 418 yards. He's good for a first down per reception for him. Top 6 rushers last year were all freshmen, 5 of them being running backs. Terrion Stewart, Nick Mosley are back. Only 120 yards per game on the ground, so we want to see that improve. Defense, though, they took major steps forward from 45 points per game to 30 points per game allowed this past season. Important returnees in the front 7, like Carl Brooks at defensive end. He had 7.5 tackles for loss on top of 12.5 tackles for loss. Darren Anders at linebacker. He was phenomenal. 9.5 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He had a pick 6 on top of 124 tackles. Walter Hare up front, 6'3", 275. He's a good nose for them. Almost 10 tackles for loss of his own. 103rd against the run. They allowed 30 touchdowns. So that's obviously a big focal point. They're getting some of the personnel back to potentially defend it better. So we'll see what happens. Top cornerback, Devin Taylor departs. 9th ranked pass defense. These guys stonewalled Minnesota earlier in the year. I think that Minnesota's held to under 100 yards passing. Struggled late in the year. We had strong efforts periodically. All the important games come at home here for this ball club. So Bowling Green, I think they could really take that step. I really wanted to pick them to win this division. I just can't do it because Bowling Green has just been so poor over the last couple of years. Even though, everyone they get back, it's a quite promising unit. We'll see what happens with Bowling Green. Excited to see their progression. Kent State in 3rd, they lose Dustin Crum, but Colin Shield, he was solid last year in limited action at quarterback, so we'll see what he can do. But they return 2 star runners, and Xavier Williams with 8-12 and 3 scores, and then Marquez Cooper, 1,205 yards and 11 touchdowns. 248 rushing yards per game for this offense. Crum departing is big, not just for the passing attack, but the ground game as well. He had about 700-plus yards of his own. I think he had double-figure touchdowns. So Crum departing is big. We'll see if Shield can provide anything on the ground. They lose 3 starters on an offensive line that was just terrible in pass protection. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully the running game doesn't suffer from those losses. They do lose 2 of the top 4 pass catchers as well. Dante Cephas, who led the team with 82 grabs, 1,240 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He's back. Jashawn Polk, I expect him to be next man up. He had 315. He was 4th on the team in receiving yards. So we'll see what happens with this offense. Obviously some big losses. The offensive line and Dustin Crum being the most notable. They allowed nearly 38 points per game on defense. They're 124th in total defense, 126th against the pass. They also allowed over 200 yards per game on the ground. If you remember watching that MAC title game, they're just getting grinded down on by NIU. They lose numerous starters as well. I do like C.J. West at defensive tackle, 8 TFL, 4 sacks, and then safety Dean Clark led the team of 116 tackles. So I think Kent State's going to take a bit of a step back just because their offense has some uncertainty, and the defense I don't have much faith in them because they've been so bad the last couple of years. They were unable to match that offense last season with how good they were. Defense has been just a big struggle point in all areas for them. Coming in fourth, Buffalo, 29 points per game last year. Lose 2 star running backs, though. Starting quarterback going to Georgia Southern. Some depth at wide receiver as well. But leading pass catcher Quinn Williams, he's back. 63 receptions, 831 yards. They do add Justin Marshall and Booby Curry from Power 5 schools, so that's some important pickups. Matt Myers wasn't good last year, though, at quarterback. He's going to battle with Rutgers transfer Cole Snyder. 2 seniors are back on what was a pretty good offensive line for Buffalo. Gabe Wallace, Jack Haas, 2 of the notables there. Ron Cook takes over in the backfield. He was pretty productive in his limited appearances here over the past few years, so we'll see what Ron Cook can do. Offense, they're going to be taking a step back, though. I just think that they lose too much firepower. Quarterback's pretty iffy right now. Offensive line, though, I think that might be a strong suit for them. 10 transfers added on a defense that, they're getting some depth back. They lost a lot when Lance Leopold departed for Kansas in the middle of the offseason last fall. 30 points per game allowed. Terrible against the run. They allowed 20 touchdowns and only snagged 3 picks through the air. So they need to establish some energy. James Patterson's back at linebacker. He's one of the MAC's best, 114 tackles, 12.5 TFL for him. Draymond Williams, he was a solid nose, 10.5 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks. And I like Kyler Lang at defensive end. 6 transfers added in the secondary, led by Elijah Blades and Jamin Muse, coming over from A&M and Boston College, respectively. So I think that's some nice, fresh talent for this team in this conference. They could really make some waves for the Bowl. 5, the Ohio Bobcats. Tim Albin replaces Frank Solich. He's been on the staff since 2005, so not much of a change here at head coach. He's been around a long time, only 22.6 points per game, though, for this offense. Curtis Rourke, 11 touchdowns, 7 picks, 180 pass yards per game, 65% comp rate. He was solid as a runner, 327 on 3 scores. Nowhere near as good as his brother was, Nathan, from a couple years ago, but Curtis has been around for a couple years. He understands the system, so I think he's going to take some major steps forward this year. O'Shawn Allison's the top returning running back. Slightly less yards than Rourke, though. Only 187 rush yards per game for this offense. They were solid, but obviously lose some production, so we'll see if they can uplift that category. Tyler Walton, 32 grabs, 380 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's the only productive pass catcher who is back for Ohio. 28 points per game allowed for this defense. 9 starters are back, though, so improvement is imminent. Bryce Houston, 104 tackles. Cannon Blaster at linebacker, 86 stops of his own, 9.5 tackles for loss. They're both top 2 in tackles and tackles for loss, so getting them back is huge because they did a little bit of everything for this football team. 280 pass yards per game allowed for Ohio, only 6 picks, mixed with a team that only had 17 sacks. So secondary was not good. The pass rush really struggled. Get those 2 guys back in the middle, 9 starters, so we got some veterans returning. But Ohio, I think it's going to be another struggle year, at least for one more season, because they just have so many question marks on both. Running things out in the East, Akron Zips, Joel Moorhead arrives, should help elevate this offense a bit. Less than 20 points per game last fall, 339 yards per game through the air. Zach Gibson transfers to Georgia Tech. Didn't do a lot in terms of yardage, but he did have a 10-0 TD to INT ratio last year, so he took care of the ball. DJ Irons, 6'6", 215. That's some really good size, 8'4", TD to INT ratio. That's not great, but we'll see what happens with him. 892 yards as the number 2 QB through the air. Cam Wiley at running back from Minnesota. He arrives. They're going to pair him up with John Zell Norris with 573 and 3 scores, 122 rush yards per game for this football team. They do add 2 talented guys at pass catcher, Shockey Jaquise Lewis from Pittsburgh, Alex Adams from LSU. Some big adds there for Akron. The max up here with Tristan Brank at tight end, 6'4", 248. He had 25 grabs for 269 and 3 scores. So I think they got some interesting pieces here on offense. I don't expect much improvement in year 1, but Joe Moorhead, maybe he'll be long-term the guy that can really fix this unit. I think they will be successful long-term, but the defense will certainly be a question mark. The run defense, they were terrible. 250 yards per game allowed on the ground. Bubba Arzlane, back from injury. Great playmaker for me at 5'9", 205. He had 125 tackles in 2019, 75 in 6 games in 2020. So this guy's obviously a big-time playmaker for them. He flies around the field, gets to the football. Jess Lloyd Boynton, he led the team with 80 tackles as well. They had 4 transfers on this defense. There's no pass rush evident or playmaking in the secondary outside of Charles Nwankpa. He had 3 picks and 9 pass breakups. So the Zips, I have them coming in 6th here in the East Division. But Joe Moorhead, an interesting addition. On the other side of things, Toledo, the Rockets, 33.4 points per game on offense. Micah Kelly replaces a 1,400-yard rusher in Britton Koback, 314 and 3 scores of his own. Minimal production for him, but he's going to have some big shoes to fill. Daquan Finn, 505 and 9 scores on the ground. He's a very fast runner. They like to get him involved in a multitude of ways. He's the grip as a passer, though. Only 57% comp rate, 157 pass yards per game. He did have an 18-2 TD to INT ratio, so that's solid. He was able to protect the football. He should continue to progress under center here. There is lots of youth at running back, though. Perry Boone comes over from Maryland to join them. 196 yards per game on the ground for this football team. We'll see if that can improve. I think they'll have a much better balance this fall. 4 to 5 starters on the O-line are junior or older, so experience up front. Devin Maddox, they need to find more contributors as a pass catcher, but he is one of the lone returners that's going to do a lot for them. 41 grabs, 521 yards a season ago. The defense was very solid. 22 per 21.8 points per game allowed for the Rockets. They get back 8 starters, though, with good assets at all levels. Starting with the defensive line, Jamal Hines. This guy was insane. 6'3", 250, absurd production. 88 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, and 8 pass breakups. Man, he was good. Dejon Johnson, 70 tackles and 12.5 tackles for loss for them. Great work from this duo of edge rushers. They pick up Deshaun Holt, 6'5", 230 from Maryland. He's going to join Deontay Johnson, a linebacker, 86 tackles and 8 tackles for loss for him. So nice little front seven here. It's got some returning playmaking and production. Secondary, I think they need to continue to progress. They did rank 22nd against the run last season, but they weren't so lucky against the pass. Zachary Ford at safety, he's a senior, is coming back. Maxine Hook, 95 tackles at safety. And Quinyon Mitchell, 8 pass breakups for them. I like this football team top to bottom, especially on defense. I think these guys will continue to get better. Jason Kendall is a nice little bunch. Thomas Hammock's philosophy led NIU to a conference championship last year. They did the improbable, went 9-5 after going 0-6 in 2020. 241 yards per game on the ground. You know, the ground and pound was the key to success for this football team. Jay Ducker led the team in rushing. He transfers to Memphis after 1,100-plus yard season. Harrison Whaley, though, 574 and 4 scores. He had 5.6 yards per carry. Ontaria Brown, 538 and 5 scores, 6.6 yards per carry. So they still have a nice little duo here. Rocky Lombardi, pretty solid game manager. You know, he had 2,600 yards. He transferred from Michigan State over here. 15-8 TD to INT ratio. He also ran for 472 and 9 scores. So he was, you know, I'd say he was more than a game manager really because he had some nice balance. 8 picks is not great, but you know, in terms of yardage and touchdowns, he was pretty solid in that category considering they had poor quarterback play from 2 seasons ago. Top 2 wide receivers are back, though. Cole Tucker, 575 and 3 touchdowns, but Trayvon Rudolph was the story of the year. 892 and 7 touchdowns as a freshman. He really emerged, burst onto the scene, and did a lot of things for this offense. The O-line was a big reason for the resurgence. O-line was a big reason for the resurgence last year, led by a strong right side, and that doesn't change one bit. So I think NIU, they have a great power offense. Biggest problem for me, though, is the defense. You know, they're brutal. Nearly 34 points per game allowed. Only 19 sacks, which was 120th in college football. They were 120th, rather, against the run. They were just so bad. You know, a lot of young guys, though. Freshman defensive tackle Devontae O'Malley had a team-high 4 sacks. Linebacker Nick Ratton, he's back 72 stops and 8 tackles for loss. Freshman safety C.J. Brown and Jordan Hanson, they were 1st and 5th on the team in tackles, with Brown leading the way with 108. So there's a lot of young guys on this team that stepped up. They need to really progress in the secondary, though. They allowed 250 pass yards per game in conference play, 27 touchdowns, only 3 picks. And 7 of those 9 wins came by 1 possession. You know, they grounded down a horrid Kent State D in the MAC title game to give them the crown. I think this team was a bit fluky last year, all those close wins, but I don't think that the ground and pound was a fluke one bit. I think they'll continue to do that this year, and the offense will continue to grow and be better. Second for me, but the opportunity to repeat is certainly legit. Central Michigan in 3rd. I think this is really a dark horse team to claim the conference. You know, 9-win ball club from a season ago. Workhorse back, Lou Nichols is back. Led the nation in yards by over 200 yards, 1,848 total yards on the ground, 16 touchdowns. The only running back with 300-plus carries in college football, and he had 341. So he touched the football a lot. He did good work as a pass catcher as well for them. I think they had 300-400-plus yards in that area as well. So Nichols, he was a stud. We'll see if he can remain durable like he was last year. Daniel Richardson at quarterback. He was also a third-year freshman, kind of like Nichols. He was a third-year freshman. You know, 2,500-plus passing yards, 24-6 TD to INT ratio, 261 pass yards per game for this team. You know, I like the balance they had. Nichols was great. Richardson did a lot for them. They lose 2 of the top 4 pass catchers, though. Dallas Dixon, 45 grabs for 701 yards and 8 touchdowns. I like him. Joel Wilson at tight end. They use him in a multitude of different ways. 31 receptions, 367, and 6 scores. So I like what they got in there. Carlos Carey from Maryland, 6'5", 203. He's some size at wide receiver, but there's not much returning production in that area, so we'll have to see what this passing game does. But they do have that balance that's there, and I think they'll be all right. They do lose 2 standout draftees at tackles. This offensive line, I think they're going to be at a world of hurt by just a little bit. I think they'll regress slightly. Good news is they do have a good quarterback and a star running back, 32.3 points per game. They might regress slightly, but the balance should still be evident for this offense. Defense loses some really important contributors, almost 26 points per game allowed, 112 versus the pass. You know, that's not great. They lose big guys from a unit that was not spectacular to begin with. Good depth on the D-line. I like Jaquise Bristol, Laquan Johnson, John Wesley Whiteside, and Thomas Income. They all had 5 tackles for loss last year or more. Kyle Moretti at linebacker, 48 stops himself as a freshman. Justin Whiteside, 7.5 tackles for loss. He had 28 tackles also as a freshman, who's now going to join the lineup. So that's some young guys in the front 7. I think they'll be a strong suit. 2 vets at cornerback, too. Rolani Stuckey, Dante Kent with 14 pass breakups. Only 5 picks last year, though, so secondary needs to improve in terms of playmaking. Kent obviously did a lot for them with his ball skills, but I still want to see some regression from this defense because they lose safety Devontae Reed. He goes to South Carolina, so we'll see what happens with Central Michigan. 3rd for me, I think that's a big dark horse team, though, to really steal this conference. Coming in at number 4, Western Michigan, they lose Caleb Elby at quarterback, Sky Moore at receiver. 2 of the top 3 pass catchers overall. Corey Coombs is back, though. 44 receptions, 768 through the air, and 6 touchdowns. Only 9 players caught a pass last year, 4 being true wide receivers. They do add 2 transfers in A.J. Abbott, Jelani Galloway, but they didn't get a lot of guys involved last year, and that might hurt them here in the long run because there's no production at all. No one really played last year for them. Their passing attack was still good, but they just did not spread it out enough. Jack Salopek takes over under center. Only return 2 starters on the offensive line. They do get back a great duo of runners, though. Sean Tyler, 5'8", 185, 1,150 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's the smoother back. Ladarius Jefferson is the bruiser, much bigger at 235, 836, and 10 touchdowns on the ground. Jefferson was great for them. So I think this offense, the passing attack, is certainly going to have some struggles. They're really going to lean on these 2 backs, and I think they'll be successful in doing so. The defense, though, 7 starters are back. They allowed 28-plus points per game, 331.5 yards per game, 5.8 yards per play. These numbers were kind of skewed. They really were not on the field that much. Linebacker Corey Moment, 68 tackles and 14 tackles for loss. He was their best playmaker in the middle of their defense. Brandon Fiske, Marshawn Nealon, both had 7-plus tackles for loss last year. Some guys on the D-line here, they do lose their top 2 pass rushers, though, so I think that's going to be a big struggle area for them is getting to the quarterback. But on the interior, though, I think they're just fine. Dorian Jackson at corner. He had 2 of the team's 4 picks. Yes, only 4 picks on the year for the Broncos. That's not good one bit. They had 12 pass breakups, or Jackson did rather. So he's the catalyst of the secondary that performed pretty well last year. Some young guys at all 3 levels. So this unit can progress. Pass rush, though, 43 sacks last season. That's a really good number for this program. That's likely to fall back because the top 2 guys do depart. Western Michigan at 4th. I think they're really going to lean on their running game. This will be a pretty tough team. It's going to be a trap game, I think, for a lot of opponents this season. Eastern Michigan, Ben Bryant heads back to Cincinnati, so Troy Powell, he's going to take over under center, transfers in. Darius Boone, 451 and 6 touchdowns. Samson Evans, 316 and 13 touchdowns. He's also back. So they got some nice guys here at running back, only 118 yards per game on the ground. But those 2 guys were quite productive for that number, especially on the O-line. 5 starters are back, but they're very poor last season. So I think they're definitely going to improve up front. They have a great receiving core, probably the conference's best. Hassan Budon, 97 receptions for 1,000-plus yards. Dylan Drummond, he had north of 700 yards, team-high 6 touchdowns. And Tanner Krause, he was good as number 3. Only played in 5 games last year. They're looking to get him back to being fully healthy. I think this is a pretty solid offense top to bottom. The offensive line obviously needs to regress. They need to figure things out at quarterback. It's not going to be too tough, though. I think they got some guys to work with. They scored 30.2 points per game last year. They outpaced the 30 they're allowing on defense. Defensive end Jose Ramirez, 1 of 5 returning starters, 6.5 sacks, 3 fumbles, 12 tackles for loss for him, joined by Tariq Spates at linebacker with a team-high 90 tackles. The pass defense was quite solid. They allowed 3,000-plus yards, but 58.6% opponent completion rate. That's a solid, respectable number to build off of. 19-8 touchdowns and picks allowed. Nearly 200 yards per game on the ground allowed by this defense. So I think the defense really needs to improve. The offense, they have some interesting pieces, but Eastern Michigan, I have them coming in 5th in the conference. Kind of like Western Michigan, though. Could be a trap team for some games. Could be a trap game for some of these teams in this conference. Very interested to see what happens. Ball State, they round things out in the West. This was a very disappointing team last year. 24.1 points per game on offense. John Paddock replaces Drew Plitt, who was a 4-year starter under center. Carson Steele was a pleasant surprise at running back last year as a freshman. He had nearly 900 yards and 6 touchdowns, 130 rush yards per game. As a whole, they returned the top 2 pass catchers in Jay Sean Jackson, who's the Cincinnati transfer. 69 grabs, 829 through the air, 5 touchdowns. Johannes Tyler, quite productive in his career, 480-plus yards in each of his last 3 years. He's still around. Pretty good offensive line, gets 5 starters back. Explosiveness and just scoring as a whole is a challenge for this offense. I don't see how it's going to really get any easier now that they have uncertainty at quarterback from a unit that was very disappointing last year. 24 points per game allowed on defense. That's a pretty good, solid mark for this team. Tavion Woodard, 8.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. Jack Sapp as well. 2 good returners at defensive end. I like Brandon Martin at linebacker, 90 tackles. 2 years back when he won Defensive Player of the Year. Got hurt last year, so only played in 5 games, but they're really desperate to get him back. Enter his 6th season, so expect a lot of things out of the veteran Martin here. Pair him up with Clayton Cole, who broke out with 108 tackles and 5 tackles for loss. Defense, secondary loses 3 starters, but they did snag 15 picks last year, and they allowed 252 pass yards per game in the conference, which is not a great mark. So they need to improve on that. Ball State, unfortunately, have them coming in last in the division after I believe I picked them to win the conference last year, and they're just flat out disappointing. I think they'll compete with guys in this division, but kind of like the teams above them, could be a team that's tough to play. I think the whole MAC's pretty interesting, but 6th for me for my look at my conference title and some award predictions. Toledo over Miami of Ohio is the prediction for me. Lou Nichols for CMU will be the Offensive Player of the Year. I don't expect him to have the exact same numbers he did last year, and I think it's going to be hard to be durable, be a workhorse like he was last fall, but Nichols, I think he's going to put up a lot of yards regardless. He's going to be leading the way for Central Michigan. Jamal Hines from Toledo. Read the numbers he had last year. Absolutely absurd production. I think he'll do kind of like Nichols, similar to last year. He'll be highly impactful. Numbers will not be as good, but he'll definitely provide a lot for this football team. Newcomer of the year, Miles Marshall. I have Miami of Ohio obviously getting to the conference championship. I think he'll be big coming from Indiana. I thought he was a very talented ball player there for the Hoosiers, and Brett Gabbard's going to love having him. Chuck Martin, coach of the year, to get those guys here. And Micah Kelly for Toledo, big breakout star. I think he's going to have a big year. Replaces a 1,400-yard rusher and Koback. I think he's going to lead the charge on the ground because they're going to want to run the ball. And DeQuan Finn, his ability to run, it's really going to take a lot of stress off the running backs, and it's going to allow the things to kind of flow for them much easier. So I have Micah Kelly as the breakout star of the year. It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.